Hi, this is David Yapel with SnapEval. In this video, we're going to introduce SnapEval, SnapEval for ADP Workforce Now, and SnapEval for Run powered by ADP. First, let's talk a bit about performance management. As I think all of us know, performance management is undergoing a significant transformation. Traditional annual reviews are usually dreaded by both workers and bosses alike for a variety of reasons. A growing number of companies are therefore replacing or complementing traditional annual performance reviews with more frequent coaching and measurement. This is what's known as continuous performance management. Now, to effectively do continuous performance management, you need light-touch, nimble tools that allow you to capture and share feedback instantly with employees. So not all continuous performance management products are the same. Let's start by contrasting SnapEval with some of the other continuous performance management solutions. First of all, there's the target customer. SnapEval is really geared towards small and mid-sized organizations, meaning that we're focused on anybody that has even less than 10 employees, all the way up to organizations that have more than 500 employees. Whereas most continuous performance management products are really focused on organizations that have at least 100 employees or more. And so they require things like minimum subscription amounts every year. The second thing is the state of performance management prior to implementing continuous performance management. And with SnapEval, most of our customers had either a manual process or no process at all for performance management prior to implementing SnapEval. And SnapEval, because it's simple, is designed to help an organization at that state become proficient at continuous performance management. By contrast, most continuous performance management products are focused on taking an organization with an existing functional performance management process and taking it to a higher level. The third thing is really the objective of continuous performance management. With SnapEval, it's really about implementing a simple, easy-to-use, effective performance management solution that provides timely, actionable feedback. Whereas with most continuous performance management products, it's really about radically overhauling the performance management process through continuous performance management tasks such as journaling, objectives and key results, which is called OKRs, or frequent pulse surveys. The next area is about the focus of the continuous performance management solution. And really the focus with SnapEval is simply to capture and share performance feedback instantly using light touch ad hoc snapshots of performance feedback. Whereas the focus of most continuous performance management products is really about maximizing employee engagement by deeply integrating the continuous performance management tasks with job workflows. So in other words, during the course of your normal workday, you're doing things such as journaling, tracking OKRs, or responding to frequent pulse surveys with most other continuous performance management products. Whereas with SnapEval, you're simply capturing a feedback snapshot whenever you see or observe something that you think should be shared with the employee, or you think of something that should be shared with the employee. So as a result of our focus on simplicity and ease of use, the cultural shift required to implement SnapEval is very low. It's a small change, and therefore it's a low risk of failure. By contrast, when you're making a radical change to your corporate culture, there's a high risk of failure, and that's the case for most continuous performance management products. As far as the technology required, for SnapEval, the main focus is around enabling managers to capture feedback for their employees, albeit it is nice if employees have access to smartphones and computers. It's not a requirement. By contrast, for most continuous performance management products, it's a requirement that everybody has access to both smartphones and/or computers at all times. And lastly, what about annual reviews? For SnapEval, we've actually designed the product in such a way that it can easily be used in conjunction with performance appraisals. And in fact, we've built functionality into the SnapEval product itself so that you can literally take snapshots that have been accumulated for an employee throughout the year and directly and automatically incorporate them into a traditional performance appraisal. On the other hand, most continuous performance management products are not compatible with traditional performance appraisals. So let's introduce SnapEval. SnapEval was founded in 2013, and our team has technical, customer support, and marketing experience, to name a few. We bootstrapped our growth from the beginning, and that means that we have a very low cost structure that's consistent with being able to deliver our key benefits, features, and services. That really means that we have the lowest pricing and highest value for SnapEval customers, and we can effectively serve very price-sensitive customers such as nonprofits. All of our functions and all of our personnel are based in Rochester, New York, which means that we're responsive, we're nimble, and all of our intellectual property is in-house. All SnapEval personnel work from home offices, we use electronic communications for all customer meetings, and all transactions are paperless. This means we minimize our carbon footprint. We've been an exclusive partner with ADP since 2015, meaning that SnapEval doesn't integrate with any other payroll platforms other than ADP. Our customers benefit by the fact that we've been vetted extensively by ADP from both a security point of view and other points of view to be in the ADP partner program, and that for ADP customers, we offer a variety of integrated features with the ADP platforms such as Workforce Now and Run. To date, we have more than 18,000 SnapEval user accounts and more than 1,400 customer instances across the United States and, in fact, around the world. And because of all these engagements, we have a lot of performance management expertise that comes from our customer engagements and working closely with customers to share with new customers. So everybody benefits. So let's look at some key features for SnapEval. Of course, the first is continuous performance management, meaning that you can actually capture and share feedback snapshots using smartphones and computers. The second is we have modern performance appraisals built right into the SnapEval product, which means we can take the snapshots that you've captured throughout the year and automatically incorporate them into a performance summary document for the employee, whether that's an annual review, a 60-day review for a new employee, or a 90-day review for a new employee, or any time that you want to do a performance appraisal for an employee. It's very, very simple, very, very fast. The third thing is organization charts. They're built right into SnapEval. You can use drag and drop features to organize your relationships in SnapEval between users. You can explore what ifs, and you can also export the org chart as a PDF or PNG or CSV file, for example. The fourth thing is push notifications. With SnapEval, you can instantly notify administrators, managers, and employees with customized push notifications to employees' smartphones. This is a great way to cut through the clutter of email, text messages, and get right to someone's smartphone in a message that they're going to see when they pick up their smartphone, if it's basically been sitting on their desk, or even if they're working in another application on their smartphone. And lastly, performance recognition. This is an optional function for SnapEval that allows you to recognize the performance excellence of an employee within the organization. When it comes to SnapEval benefits, I like to use the analogy of an iceberg because there are some very obvious ones that are clear for everyone to see just even casually looking at SnapEval, such as it's simple, it's easy to use, employees receive timely goal-aligned feedback, that it's free for organizations with less than 10 employees, and it's ultra affordable for organizations that have more than 10 employees. But there's also a lot of things below the waterline, so to speak, that are benefits. For example, HR professionals can proactively coach someone who's creating feedback for an employee before that feedback is actually shared with the employee. It's called feedback queuing, and we'll talk about it more in a few minutes. Another is that when capturing feedback, you have the opportunity to decide whether you want to share it right away or defer sharing it to a future point in time. A third thing is that we support non-traditional organizations in terms of their organizational structure. Things like organizations that are non-hierarchical, that have more of a team approach to how they're organized, or all kinds of different complex reporting relationships. And that basically you have, as an HR professional, comprehensive visibility to both current and former employees' feedback. This is very powerful and very important if you ever found your organization defending itself against a wrongful termination or the threat of a wrongful termination lawsuit. So these are just examples of some of the things that are, like I say, below the waterline as far as things that are important about SnapEval. So now let's talk about SnapEval pricing. SnapEval Unlimited Edition for small teams includes all SnapEval features. It's the perfect solution for teams that have 10 or less employees. It's absolutely free. You can use it indefinitely. There are no time limitations. There are no feature limitations. It's truly not a trial version of software. If you have a larger organization, this is also the perfect way to explore SnapEval without any risk or any cost. There's no credit card required. You simply sign up for a free 10-user account and use it for as long as you like. And you can even swap your employees in and out of a free 10-user edition to have different team members in your organization try using SnapEval and see if it's a good fit for your organization without any kind of pressure. If you do have a larger organization and you decide to roll SnapEval out to that larger organization, then basically you're going to be choosing from the Performance Management Edition or the Unlimited Edition for large teams. The only difference between the two is there's a performance recognition module that is included with the Unlimited Edition that is not included with the Performance Management Edition. And the price is either $2.25 per user per month or $3.25 per user per month, depending on which of these two editions you elect to choose. Now, for all three of these editions, the following things are included. First, there are no setup fees of any kind. The second thing is that the cost is actually based on your actual enrollments. Now, for the free 10-user account, it's free no matter whether you have 5 people or 8 people or 10 people in it. But if you're talking about the large edition or large team editions, then it's based on your actual enrollment of employees during that month. If you're a non-ADP customer, it would be billed to your credit card each month. If you're an ADP customer, then it's included as a line item on your monthly ADP invoice. There's absolutely no annual contract or commitment. You can cancel SnapEval at any time and take all of your data with you. We also include a lot of free services. First and foremost, we provide free instant customization and configuration, and we'll talk more about what those services are, but basically it means your corporate logo, your goals, all your various things about your organization that you want to incorporate into SnapEval are included by us at no cost to you. We'll help you with that configuration. Secondly, we include free technical support and updates. Free training. We'll actually, through our web interface, help train your team members with how to use SnapEval. And then lastly, there's a free mobile app for SnapEval for the iPhone and for your Android devices. And we highly recommend you use it. It's got a lot of really nice features in it, such as voice to text. So irrespective of whether you're using the free edition for small teams or one of the paid subscription versions for large teams, all of these things I've just outlined here are included. So let's talk about getting started with SnapEval. And this is for organizations that are not using the ADP payroll tools. You're going to go to SnapEval.com and sign up for a free 10-user account. And literally this will take you 2 minutes or less. You're simply going to fill out a form, get an email that's automatically generated from the SnapEval system, click on a link within that email to activate your account, set your password, and you're off and running. It's that simple. If you decide that you want to explore SnapEval further, we automatically include sample users and sample data with your SnapEval account. But we want to basically customize it for your specific organization. And again, this is a free service. So basically, if you provide us things like your organizational chart, so we know reporting relationships, corporate-wide values, specific goals, job competencies, things like that, we will then take and essentially incorporate those into your SnapEval account. And there's no cost for this. So it's a completely free service for you. But now your account will not only be configured for you, but we also brand it for you. So it's going to have your corporate logo in it. So it will look and feel like an extension of your brand to your employees. Now you can continue with that as long as you like, and it won't cost you anything for up to 10 users. That's a free service from us, and we're happy to do it for you. If you decide that you want to deploy to more than 10 users, then basically just ask us and we will bulk enroll your additional users. So if you have 40 employees or 100 employees, you don't have to put them in by hand. We'll literally take and put them in for you because we have bulk enrollment tools to do that very easily. You would just send us a spreadsheet with the people's names, their email addresses, and we'll literally set that up for you. That would also be the time that you'll either sign up for the Performance Management Edition or the Unlimited Edition. So your cost is either $2.25 or $3.25 per user per month. That's the first point in the process where you're going to actually spend any money. And again, there's no upfront costs, there's no contract or commitment. You basically are paying as you go. And then, of course, we will actually help with training your managers and your employees. Via web meeting, we'll get in, we'll walk your employees and your managers through the steps of how to use the SnapEval Mobile App and web portal. It's an easy process for pretty much everyone. And this way we also will record the session so that if you have some employees that can't attend, they can watch the video at some future point and learn how to use their SnapEval account. So that's how simple it is. If you're an ADP customer, the process is pretty similar but just slightly different. Instead of going to SnapEval.com and signing up, you're going to go to what's called the ADP Marketplace, which is ADP's app store of third-party applications that integrate with the ADP payroll tools. So you're going to sign up for a free 10-user account for either SnapEval for ADP Workforce Now or SnapEval for Run powered by ADP in the ADP Marketplace. And again, it's a free 10-user account. It'll take you about 2 minutes to sign up for it. When you go through that process of signing up for it, you'll want to sign into your account because there's a consent request form that ADP presents you with that allows us then to populate your account with information from your ADP payroll tool, such as emails and names and reporting relationships and departments and that kind of information, just basic things that come from ADP that make it very, very easy for us to configure and maintain your SnapEval account and minimize the amount of administration to manage SnapEval because it's, again, all integrated with ADP. So you'll accept the consent request form, we'll import the departments, we'll add your corporation's values and competencies if you'll provide those to us. And again, you can use that free 10-user account as long as you like. It's completely free. If you decide that you want to add more users, then basically, again, you're going to take and go to the ADP Marketplace and either sign up for the Performance Management Edition or for the Unlimited Edition of SnapEval for your particular ADP payroll tool, and you're off and running. And again, there's no upfront cost, there's no contract or commitment, and you're going to get billed directly by ADP, either that $2.25 or $3.25 per employee per month. And of course, again, we will help with training your managers and employees via the web. So it's all pretty straightforward. This is a very easy process. We've done it hundreds of times with organizations. Now, I did talk about customization and configuration. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves in is branding your SnapEval account with your corporate logo and a complementary color theme. So we really want this to be an extension of your brand to your managers and your employees. So instead of featuring SnapEval as the logo, it's going to feature your company's logo and a complementary color theme in both the web portal and the mobile app and in emails that get generated from SnapEval. The second thing is, as I've said already, we're going to customize your account with your corporate goals, values, job competencies, and we do use what's called a two-tier cascaded system for goals. So you're going to have your corporate-wide goals, and then any more specific things like job competencies or department goals or individual goals cascade from those corporate-wide goals, and we'll talk about that more. The third thing is we'll customize the achievement levels. You can either have 0, 3, 4, or 5 achievement levels in SnapEval. So essentially they can have any naming convention you want. Some organizations don't want any achievement levels. Some want 5 levels. We'll configure that to however you want it to be. And then lastly, we'll do some additional configuration around things like reporting relationships. We'll set up groups as necessary, predicated again on various roles, departments, and other things in your actual organization that will help SnapEval to be organized in a way that will really reflect how you want SnapEval to operate for your organization. So now let's cover some SnapEval definitions. The first is the concept of a snap. A snap is a method to instantly capture performance feedback snapshots using familiar concepts from traditional performance appraisals. Sharing is the act of communicating that snap or feedback snapshot to the snap recipient. A group is just a collection of individuals, such as a department, a job function, a team, or even a single individual. Performance management. Performance management is focused around feedback that is private to the recipient's managers, and administrators. A performance summary. A performance summary in SnapEval is simply a performance appraisal document that can automatically include the employee's snaps. And lastly, performance recognition. Performance recognition is basically a feedback snapshot that can be nominated for public recognition of performance excellence within the organization. So contrasting performance management, which is private to the recipient, and performance recognition, which is a feedback snapshot that can be made public within the organization. So now let's introduce the concept of a snap. And basically, it all comes from traditional performance appraisals. On the left-hand side, we have a traditional performance appraisal, and it's really organized around what we call goal areas. Goal areas are inclusive of corporate-wide goals, corporate values, job competencies, individual goals, department goals, all those kinds of things. We lump them all into the category that we call goal areas. And so in a traditional performance appraisal, you'll have many different goal areas, such as job knowledge and work quality and attendance and so on and so forth. And for each goal area, you generally find that there's some level of achievement that's required and some feedback details as you fill out a traditional performance appraisal. So in our example here, we're giving an excellent in the area of job knowledge to Tammy Martin, and the feedback details provide the justification for the achievement level that we're providing. And this is a summary of something that's gone on for some period of time, maybe for the past year, as far as Tammy's performance is concerned. And as you fill out this performance appraisal, you'd go through each one of the goal areas sequentially and fill out details for all those different goal areas. Now, on the right-hand side, we have a kind of a snapshot here of the SnapEval Mobile App. And what you'll see is, rather than filling out 7 or 8 or 10 different goal areas, we're just going to select one goal area, provide some level of achievement for the feedback we're about to give, and some details, some feedback details, which is a qualitative text note that give information to the recipient, in this case Betty Goodman, about her performance in the area of teamwork. What's great about this is it's very easy to create a snap. It takes literally seconds to do, and in the mobile app you use voice to text, so it takes almost no time whatsoever to capture a snap and share it with the employee. So all of the concepts in SnapEval around goal areas, achievement levels, and feedback details come directly from traditional performance appraisals. So these are really intuitive and familiar concepts for most managers and most employees. Now let's talk about communicating feedback using snaps. You can instantly create a snap in SnapEval using a tablet, computer, or smartphone. And with the smartphone and the mobile app, there's no typing required because we have voice-to-text support. The key idea here is that you're going to capture feedback when you think of it or when you observe performance so that this feedback isn't forgotten. As you're submitting the snap, you have options as to how you're going to share that snap with the employee. The first choice would be to immediately share that snap. This means that they're going to receive the snap via email, they're going to get a push notification to their smartphone if they have the SnapEval mobile app installed, and they can view that snap in the SnapEval web portal or in the mobile app. So they'll see the details of the snap that you've captured for them. This is perfect for a thank you or an acknowledgement for a job well done, because the recipient's going to receive this feedback electronically immediately. On the other hand, if this is a developmental snap for the employee, it's best to capture it but not instantly share it with the employee. So you basically can defer sharing the snap. Essentially, this means there's no email or notification to the recipient. They cannot view the snap if they log into the web portal or the mobile app. And what it does is it gives you the opportunity to have a discussion as the person creating the snap with the intended recipient prior to sharing this feedback electronically. So the recipient is not on the receiving end of an email that says, hey, you need to work on this particular skill, for example. And so you have this conversation between the manager or the person creating the snap and the recipient about this content, about this feedback, and then you have, as the feedback creator, the opportunity to even edit the snap prior to sharing it with the recipient electronically, meaning that you can incorporate elements of your discussion with the employee or recipient that may be important to making the snap really reflect the situation. And so you literally can share it after the conversation electronically with your edits to document the developmental feedback, which is very important for a whole variety of reasons, including helping the employee to do better over time, and also, in the worst case, as documentation if you ever found your organization subject to potentially a wrongful termination lawsuit. This kind of feedback is critically important, and the fact that you've had the conversation with the employee is also critically important. The third option is to capture a snap and never share it with the employee. And this can be useful for taking notes about the employee. Again, unshared snaps cannot be reviewed by the recipient, even if the recipient is a manager or what's called a group administrator in SnapEval. So if you capture a snap for someone and you don't share it with them, they are not going to be privy to the contents of that snap. The only people that can see unshared snaps for them are organization administrators, which are basically the people that are your human resource professionals, for example. So that's the third option. So this idea of defining lots of different ways that you can decide how to share a snap is really, really key to SnapEval. We're not forcing you to immediately share a snap with an employee upon creating it. So now let's look at SnapEval from a workflow perspective. This slide is divided into two halves. The top half is focused around performance management, again, where all feedback is private to the recipient and the recipient's manager and administrators in SnapEval. The bottom half is performance recognition, where feedback can be nominated to be made public within the organization. So first of all, on the performance management side, when an individual creates a snap, and again, typically this is a manager creating a snap for an employee, the snap first goes through an inappropriate language filter before it's submitted into the system. If the content includes any one of 400 unacceptable words and variants of words, the snap won't actually even be created. Essentially, it'll get kicked back out of the system. The person that tries to create the snap will be notified by email, as will SnapEval administrators, organization administrators, of the content that was tried to be created and was deemed to have an inappropriate word or phrase in it. And so we don't even allow content that has an inappropriate word in it to go into the SnapEval system. So that's the first step in the process. If it passes through the inappropriate language filter, there are no words or phrases detected that are inappropriate, it then goes to the blue box you see here that says SnapEval Administrator. This is the step that we looked at in the last slide where we talked about a snap being shared or not. The point here is that, again, if a snap has been shared or even if it has not been shared, someone who is an organization administrator in SnapEval can see that snap in its entirety, basically. Also, if someone is what's called a group administrator and the recipient is a member of that group administrator's group, they can also see a snap that has not been shared with the employee. So again, if a snap is created but not shared, it's in that box that says hold until shared. And the person that is the intended recipient cannot see that snap,
If they log into their SnapEval web portal or the mobile app, they don't have any notification that Snap has been created. It's basically transparent to the recipient at this point in the process. Of course, if the Snap is shared, then it is conveyed to the employee and they see it. So there's another step though, and especially this becomes important when we start to think about peer feedback. In addition to the inappropriate language filter, which is clearly kind of black and white as it relates to things that are acceptable and unacceptable, there's also sometimes some more gray content in the sense that it's not clearly horrible, but it's probably something you'd prefer that an employee doesn't receive as a snap either. And so to deal with that, we built in a feature called feedback queuing. And what this does is essentially a set of criteria that you as an organization administrator in SnapEval can specify that will cause a snap to get queued for your review first before it goes to that next stage where it's either held because it's unshared or it's shared with the employee. So in other words, after the inappropriate language filter, if a snap that has been created meets a criteria that you've pre-specified in advance, it will be queued for your review, meaning you'll be notified that this snap has been queued for your review by email and via push notification to your smartphone. You'll also see it in the Notification Center that there is a snap queued for your review. And you not only have visibility to that snap, you can edit that snap and collaborate with the creator of the snap on that content. So you can proactively coach the creator on this snap about best practices to make this feedback most effective. Now, what kind of criteria are we talking about here? Well, one that's very, very popular is negative sentiment. So we actually have an advanced language processing algorithm in SnapEval that looks at the content of the text component of a snap and will score it on a scale of sentiment, negative sentiment. And if it's deemed to have enough negative sentiment in it, it will be queued for your review automatically. I'll give you an example. If I created a snap and I said, Tom, you were a bad employee. You should go get a new job. There's no foul language in there per se, but clearly that sentiment in the snap itself is very negative. And that's an excellent example of a snap that would be queued for your review as an administrator in SnapEval and not released to the employee, even if the person that created the snap had intended to share it immediately. Because again, you can see in the logical order of things, the feedback queuing step comes in front of the sharing step. Now here's another subtlety, and it's something I get asked about a lot. If the person that created the snap intended to share it instantly, what happens when it gets released from the queue? Well, the answer is you, as the administrator in SnapEval, can define what will happen next. You can either allow it to be shared instantly, or you can release it from the queue and have it not be shared. So it would still be essentially in that next stage where it says hold until shared, until such time as either you as the organization administrator or the person that created the snap decide to share it with the employee. So in other words, just because you release a snap from the queue does not mean it's instantly shared with the recipient. It all depends on the sharing status of the snap when it's released from the queue. Okay? So this is a very powerful tool that allows you to proactively coach managers or feedback creators about best practices, not only the content, but maybe the best way to deliver this message. How do you have a conversation around this particular issue in advance with the employee? And of course, what's wonderful about this in addition is you as the organization administrator are made aware of this issue or concern long before it's shared with the employee, because again, it's been queued for your review. Now, I've just shared with you one queuing criteria, which happens to be negative sentiment, but there are others. For example, things like there's a dictionary that you can create yourself that will cause any of the words that you might deem to be questionable or of concern that will cause a snap to be queued for your review. This is outside of the inappropriate language filters built-in dictionary. These are, again, words that you might be concerned about because you hear them around your office. Other examples are based on who is the originator or the creator of the snap, who is the recipient of the snap. And there's a whole lot of other criteria as well that you can specify. And if it meets one or more of those criteria, a snap will be queued for your review automatically. So this really puts you in front of the whole issue as it relates to feedback being shared with employees, especially peer-to-peer feedback. If that's what you choose to do with SnapEval, which you can do, have peer-to-peer feedback, this really allows you to have a degree of comfort that things aren't going to be shared peer-to-peer as far as feedback is concerned without your awareness of that. So that's feedback queuing. Now, the other piece of this is what we call performance recognition. Now, if the Spotlight performance recognition feature isn't enabled, like for example, if you sign up for the version of SnapEval in the ADP marketplace that is the performance management piece, you don't have this option. But if you're using the free 10 user account, or if you're using the unlimited edition for large teams version of SnapEval, the version that costs $3.25 per employee per month, if you've got more than 10 employees, then you have this option for Spotlight. And Spotlight basically goes like this. When a snap gets created by someone, they have the option to nominate that snap for public recognition for performance excellence within the organization. And you can see how that happens after the inappropriate language filter. And when that happens, basically it goes down to the lower half where it says nominated for Spotlight recognition. If the answer is yes, then that snap goes into a process where, again, you as the organization administrator are notified that there's a snap that has been nominated for performance excellence. And you can then look at that snap. You can accept that nomination, or you can decline that nomination. Now, it's interesting that if you decline that nomination, of course, that's where it ends here right below it says nomination reviewed, the individual still receives their snap because that's on the top half of this slide. That's under the performance management side. So it doesn't affect the performance management side at all if you decline a nomination for a Spotlight. On the other hand, if you accept it, then what happens is, in addition to the employee receiving their snap as they normally would on the performance management side, they get a second email from the SnapEval system that says, hey, you've been recognized for performance excellence. And in addition to that, that snap gets published to an internal dashboard that everybody in your SnapEval instance has access to that will basically show all the feedback that has been recognized for performance excellence. So it's just a very simple way for individuals to nominate others for performance excellence for a particular action that they've taken, for managers to recognize the performance excellence of their employees. And if you want to run a more formal campaign around that, where you're doing, let's say, quarterly reviews of performance excellence, you can run reports and basically export all of the snaps that have been recognized for performance excellence during any particular period of time. So this is basically the core elements of how SnapEval works. And if you understand this, it really is a very straightforward product. So now let's look at another important attribute around SnapEval. And this is with regard to, again, organization administrators like yourself, who are the individuals that have created your SnapEval account, have full access to add users to SnapEval and remove users and change corporate-wide goals and everything else. That's what we call an organization administrator. And again, we'll talk more about this role in a few minutes. But the key thing I want to point out here is this. As it relates to snaps, which are our common currency, if you will, for creating and sharing feedback, you as an organization administrator have full visibility to the entire life cycle of a snap. So if we look across the top axis here, from snap created to snaps for terminated workers, all those different columns, this is essentially the life cycle of a snap that it can go through. And then down the rows here are the elements of a snap, things like who created it, who was the recipient of the snap, what was the organization-wide goal, was there a more specific group-level goal? Again, this would be things like a particular job competency or what have you. What was the achievement level of that snap? What was the text component of that snap, or the feedback details, in other words? When was the event around it, for example, being created? When did that happen? What's the sharing status? Was it shared or unshared? If someone edits a snap, who actually edited it? You can actually add comments to an existing snap, which is another important feature we'll talk more about. But basically, it means that as a snap is created, the person who is the recipient of the snap or the person who is the creator of the snap or administrators in SnapEval can add comments to a snap. So essentially, as we go through the life cycle of the snap, the first thing is the snap gets created. Again, you as the organization administrator through various dashboards have full visibility to who created it, who was the recipient, and all the other things that I just mentioned here. If that snap gets shared with an employee, you can also see all the same attributes related to that because, again, you're an organization administrator. As I showed you on the last slide, you have full visibility to snaps that have been shared and snaps that have not been shared in the SnapEval system. If someone makes an edit to a snap, again, this example would be for perhaps someone that has not shared a snap with an employee. Maybe they have a meeting with the employee because this is a developmental snap, and then they subsequently want to share the snap with the employee. You can run a report and see what the content of that snap was before it was edited and after it was edited. Who did the edit? What the achievement level was, what the feedback details were, what the goal areas were. So you have full visibility to any changes that are made to any snaps, including what the content was before the change and the content after the change. This is really important if there was ever a controversy around, well, someone created a snap and I don't think this is what it said for me when I first received it. So that's a good report that you can run. As I mentioned, another thing that you can do is you can add comments to a snap. As an administrator, you can. As a recipient of a snap that's been shared with you, you can. As a creator of a snap, you can add comments to it. And of course, those comments are visible to both the recipient of the snap, if the snap has been shared with the recipient, the person that created the snap, and administrators in the SnapEval system. So again, you have full visibility to comments that are added to a snap, including when it was added, the particular comment, who added the comment, and what the comment actually was. Another thing that we do is, again, this is around prevention or defense of a wrongful termination lawsuit, is not only do we want to know that developmental feedback has been shared with an employee, but we want to know that the employee has actually viewed that feedback. And so one of the things that we do is we actually take and log the date and time that an individual who's a recipient of a snap views that snap. Again, this presumes that the snap has been shared with that recipient. They now are aware that it's in the system. They've received an email that tells them it's in the system. They may have gotten a push notification if they have the mobile app on their smartphone. So whether they use the mobile app or whether they use the web portal to view the snap, when they first look at the snap, we automatically log the date and time that occurs. And that's, again, for your organization's protection. So that if your employment attorney came to you and said, okay, I see you've shared developmental feedback with the employee, but did they ever view it? You can tell them definitively exactly when they had viewed that snap. A very, very powerful feature for you. Now, snaps have all types of different elements of their life cycle, and one is whether they're an active snap, meaning it's a snap that the employee sees when they log into their account, or it's certainly one that you see as an administrator in the SnapEval system. And any snap that is currently active in the system, you have full visibility to all elements of it, as you can see here. You can also archive snaps. One of the reasons for archiving snaps is, let's say it's your end of your calendar year, you've done your performance appraisals. If you do that for employees with the SnapEval system, you've done performance summaries for everyone, and now you want to clear the dashboards. You want to make it so that for the next year, they're not looking at all the snaps that someone received in the prior year. You can actually archive snaps in the SnapEval system. But it doesn't mean that you don't have access to all the data relative to those archive snaps. You do as an organization administrator. The same thing's true for deleted snaps. So if someone deletes a snap, whether it's an administrator, whether it's someone that's just creating a snap themselves and decides to delete it, and again, this would be someone who's a manager, for example, or a group administrator, or yourself as an organization administrator, you have visibility to all deleted snaps. They never really go away from the system. And then lastly, let's talk about snaps for terminated workers. If someone is no longer with your organization, there's no reason that you should have to pay for that employee any longer. So you will essentially unassign them from the SnapEval system because they're not going to get any new snaps. They're not going to get any new feedback from this point forward because they're no longer a part of your company. However, that doesn't mean that you don't have access to all the feedback they've received. On the contrary, when you run reports for that employee, you can see all the snaps that they received while employed. So it doesn't cost you anything for employees that are no longer with your company to still be able to access all the feedback that was given to them while employed, including all the data elements you see here. Because again, this is the most important documentation for you in the event of a wrongful termination defense. So this is basically the life cycle of a SNAP and the fact that you as the organization administrator have full visibility to it through its whole life cycle. Now let's talk about reporting relationships. In SnapEval, reporting relationships are important because they define who can give feedback to whom. Basically, managers can give feedback to their assigned employees. That's the basic level, if you will, of how things work in SnapEval. In addition to that, if you turn on 360-degree feedback, which is simply a checkbox that you check and then save your settings as an organization administrator, you can turn on what's called 360-degree feedback, and that means that anybody can give feedback to anybody else in the organization. And again, this goes back to what we showed you a few slides ago, where we talked about the concept that when you go through the workflow for a SNAP, we do things like the inappropriate language filter and the feedback queuing, because once you allow anyone to give feedback to anyone else, you as the organization administrator definitely want to be out in front of any concerns as it relates to the content of a SNAP. So again, 360-degree feedback can augment your normal reporting relationships and allow anybody in the organization to give feedback to anyone else. There are also what we call primary relationships and secondary relationships in SnapEval. And what that means is it really only has to do with whether those relationships show up on the org chart itself or not. So how things work is, as an employee, you can have one primary manager and you can have as many primary reports as are assigned to you in the SnapEval system. So you can have multiple primary reports and one primary manager. Now, if you're an ADP user for ADP Workforce Now, these are typically the relationships that come directly from ADP Workforce Now. And you can sync those relationships automatically from ADP Workforce Now, so you don't even have to set them up in SnapEval or maintain them. If you make a change in ADP, those reporting relationships will automatically change in SnapEval. But you can augment these relationships with what we call secondary relationships. And what that means is you can assign as many managers as you want to each employee, as many secondary managers as you want. So each user can have one primary manager and as many secondary managers as you want them to have. And again, the only difference between being a primary manager and a secondary manager is the secondary manager relationships don't show up in the built-in org chart in SnapEval. And the same thing is true for secondary reports. You can have as many secondary reports as you want. So as I said before, the secondary reports are identical to primary relationships, except they aren't displayed in the hierarchical org chart. That's the only difference between the two. So if you're a secondary manager for an employee, those employees will show up on your My Team dashboard just as if you were a primary manager for that particular employee. Now, one of the real benefits of this architecture is that we can support some very complex reporting relationships. Different organizations sometimes work in teams. They have matrix organizations where individuals have multiple managers, and SnapEval fully supports that. So as a first example here, multiple managers are allowed for an employee, which is very powerful. Again, it's just going to be one primary manager, but as many secondary managers as you want to assign to that particular employee. The other thing that we're going to talk about here, and we'll get more into this a little further into the slide deck, essentially, if you are a manager and only have the manager role, you can only see the feedback that you give to an employee. So, for example, if the primary manager here in this case was again, just had the manager role in SnapEval, the primary manager would not be able to see any feedback that any of the secondary managers give to that employee. Now, that's useful in scenarios like a primary manager who may be more of a supervisor for the employee than perhaps a full manager. Perhaps someone who works a particular shift on a production floor, and different employees regularly rotate through that particular schedule, and that manager may have different employees that he or she is responsible for, but only from the perspective of giving them feedback. So you don't really want that particular person necessarily to see feedback that the employee has received from others in the organization. Now, if you want that primary manager to be able to see feedback that the employee receives from others in the organization, then you also add the group administrator role for that particular person. And again, we'll talk more about that, but by being both a manager and a group administrator in SnapEval as your roles, if you will, in SnapEval, you can then see all the feedback that the employee has received from anybody else in the company. So if I was a primary manager and I also had a group administrator role, I could see any feedback the employee got from all the secondary managers and from any peers as well. And basically where this really shows up as far as usefulness to have the ability to have multiple managers is in situations like you have matrix management in your company, or you have supervisors for various shifts like I talked about, or maybe you have, like we have in the case with many certified public accounting firms, you have people that work in teams, and the teams are really not structured the same way as your organizational hierarchy is from a who reports to whom perspective. And so team leaders for these various teams who kind of augment or replace the traditional organizational hierarchy are perfect examples of multiple managers for an employee. Another example would be that we allow what are called circular relationships. So what that means is you can have the same individual be both a manager for you and a direct report to you. In other words, they're both like your manager and a subordinate to you. Like you see, user one here is both a manager and a report to the employee. Now you might say, well, where does that come into play? Well, it comes into play in a couple different areas. First of all, sometimes you have teams where you want to do 360-degree feedback within the team. So that means within the confines of the team itself, each individual can see, basically can give feedback and receive feedback from any other member of the team. But you don't want to have the general 360-degree feedback for everybody in the whole company. That's an example of how it works. Another that I've seen that's very common is you have co-executives that are responsible for giving each other feedback. So this allows each co-executive to be a manager and an employee to each other. So let's look at how this looks inside of SnapEval. And we have this feature called Organization Hierarchy Org Chart. There's a one that's made visible to everybody in the company if you choose to do so. So everybody can see the org chart in the whole company, or you can hide the org chart and only make it visible for organization administrators. We're going to talk about in this area here, the one that is visible only to organization administrators, because it's only on that org chart where you can actually change settings. The one that's visible to everybody in the company is basically a view-only org chart. And you access the one that's visible for everybody in the menu there. If you look under where it says SnapEval, where it says org chart right below it, that would be the link that everybody has access to, that is a SnapEval user in your organization that could see the org chart itself, the view-only version of the org chart. If you choose to hide it, then that org chart link in the navigation menu is no longer available to anybody. And you just have access to the org chart yourself as an organization administrator. So from the perspective of actually setting up the org chart, here's how things kind of work. When you add users to SnapEval, basically they're going to show up in this table below the org chart itself, where it says add users. And each user will have a green button by them that you can click on to add that user to the org chart. When you add them to the org chart, their node, as it's called, will just be there by itself. You can then drag and drop the nodes to wherever you want them to be to set up the reporting relationships. So you'll take someone who is a subordinate and you'll drag their node over the top of someone who is a manager or their manager, and that will set the relationships. When you create those relationships, don't forget to click the Save Changes button. If you don't save changes when you navigate away, they'll revert to whatever the state was as far as the reporting relationships before you did any of your dragging and dropping. So this is the methodology to essentially create reporting relationships. Now, if you're ADP and using ADP Workforce Now, these reporting relationships can be imported directly from the ADP Workforce Now system and maintained. So everything syncs to ADP. If there are changes in reporting relationships made in ADP, they will be automatically updated at least once a day in the SnapEval system. Another thing you can do is, if you'll notice there's three little dots down in the lower right-hand corner of the node. If you click on that, it will allow you to do things such as changing the secondary relationships or adding secondary relationships to a particular user. So you'll just click on the node where those three little dots are. It'll bring up a little menu. You can click on Manage Additional Relationships, and you can go in and make changes like adding secondary managers, secondary reports, and so on and so forth. You can also click another link that's in the menu that says Remove Relationships. That'll essentially remove all relationships for that particular user as it relates to the SnapEval system. And so if you then just save changes and refresh the page, that user then will show up back down in the Add Users table below the org chart itself. The next thing is there's a search function. So if you've got a large organization with 100 employees or hundreds of employees, sometimes it's difficult to find the person you're looking for. So you can use the search function and search by name. Very simple to do. Any sequence of letters in their name, and it'll just drop a menu, and you can click on that person's name, and it'll basically point you to that place in the org chart where that user's node is. Another thing is layout options. If you click this little down arrow down in the lower right-hand side here, essentially it'll reveal this section here that shows you the different layouts. And you can select the layout. Now this is just for viewing. If you again browse away from the page, it will revert back to the default layout. But if you want to do something like exporting the layout, perhaps you have things organized just how you want to see it, you can export the org chart as a PDF file or a PNG or a CSV file, and it will export it if you are looking at a PNG, for example, with whatever layout that you have selected at that particular point in time. So that's basically how the organization hierarchy org chart works. It should make it a very simple process for you to add your users and manage their reporting relationships. One last thing I'll mention is if you click on the Manage Additional Relationships button for a user like you see here for Betty Goodman, you can not only manage the secondary relationships, but you can also manage the primary relationships on that same page. Why that's important is if you have a very large org chart, sometimes it gets really difficult to do drag and drop because of the scale of things. So it's very simple to also manage primary and secondary relationships on that same page for any given user. So now let's look at SnapEval Roles. As an individual, you can have 1, 2, 3, or all 4 of these roles. You can be a user, plus a manager, plus a group administrator, plus an organization administrator. As a new user just added to SnapEval, you'll be a user only. And so essentially you're primarily going to be a recipient of feedback from others. You can also do self-snaps or create feedback about your own performance, if you will. If 360-degree feedback is enabled in the SnapEval instance, then you're allowed to give feedback to anyone else in the organization. As it relates to performance summaries, which again is this concept of a performance appraisal that incorporates automatically also snaps or continuous feedback that has been given to an employee, the employee or the user can create a performance summary for themselves. They can also collaborate on that with group administrators or groups they are a member of, as well as organization administrators. There are a lot of things that they're not allowed to do, such as submitting a performance appraisal as complete, or performance summary as we call it as complete. They can't add users to the SnapEval account or system for that company, or assign group administrators. They can't create new goals for a group or for the company, and they cannot send push notifications to anybody else in the organization. Now, when you start to set up reporting relationships, as we looked at a little bit earlier, then the person who is the supervisor or manager, if you will, automatically takes on this managerial role. So, for example, when you drag and drop the subordinate node over the node of the person who will, in effect, become the manager in the org chart, in the hierarchy org chart, that person who becomes the manager automatically has these additional things that they can now do in SnapEval. The primary thing, of course, is that they're allowed to give feedback to others that are assigned to them as reports. And so essentially they can give feedback to their assigned reports. The caveat with this role is that they are only allowed to view the feedback that they themselves have given to their assigned employees. In other words, if an employee has received feedback from anybody else in the organization, whether it's another manager or a peer, the person who only has the supervisor role for that employee cannot see feedback that has come from those other managers or from peers to that particular employee. And where this becomes important is in situations such as someone who is truly a shift supervisor, for example, on a production floor, where they are responsible for that employee only in the context of that particular shift, and they may give feedback to the employee, but they don't need to have any privy or any insight into feedback that the employee has received from anybody else in the organization. So that's the reason that we set up this role this way. They also can initiate a performance appraisal, performance summary as we call them, for their assigned employees. They can collaborate with group administrators and organization administrators on any performance summary that they create. But again, as you can see a little further down here, there are a whole lot of things that they can't do, such as submitting a performance summary as complete. They can't add new people to the company or organization in SnapEval. They can't add any groups or assign group administrators. They can't add any group goals or members to a group. And they can't send any push notifications, any custom push notifications to anyone. So that basically that's the second role. The third role is what we call a group administrator. And again, as we've talked about already, a group is basically a collection of people. It could be a department, it could be a team, it could be a particular job function in your organization. And so when someone becomes an administrator for that group, they have additional things they are allowed to do. The most important of which is that they can now see feedback for the employees that are in their assigned group or groups. They can see all of the feedback that the employees in their group or groups have received, as well as all the feedback that those employees have given. So they have much more visibility, but again, just within the confines of their own particular group. They can also edit and create performance summaries for anybody who's a member of one or more of their groups. And of course, as we've already talked about, they can collaborate with others on performance summaries. Anybody who's an organization administrator, group administrator, or the document creator, if that document creator would be like the manager or the employee themselves that created the performance summary. The other thing that they can do, which is very important, is they can set up goals for their assigned groups, which is very powerful. So if you have someone who is a department head, for example, and you make them a group administrator for that particular department group, then they can create the specific group level goals that will apply to everybody who is in their particular department. They also have the ability to send push notifications to others in the organization, which we'll explore in more detail a little bit further into this presentation. The last role is organization administrator. This is the highest level role in the SnapEval system, and this is the role that basically can essentially do anything. They can add new people to the organization, remove them. They can assign or create new corporate-wide goals. They can essentially see all feedback within the whole system, as we've talked about earlier, both related to performance summaries as well as to snaps themselves. And so this role is basically something that is typically only given to a very few people in the organization. Generally, it's your human resource professionals. And for people who are senior leadership, they often become group administrators for departments or for all departments within the company. And again, we're going to look at that a little bit more here further into the presentation. So you, if you created your SnapEval account, probably have all four of these roles. If your sample users are still in your account, or if you've gone through and set some things up, it's very likely that you have all four of these roles as an individual. So now let's look into some more specific concepts around groups. And the first thing, as we've already talked about, a group is simply a collection of individuals, such as a department or a team or just an individual. As far as creating groups and membership of groups is concerned, it can be done manually by organization administrators. If you're an ADP customer, it can be done automatically through the integration with the ADP payroll platforms. If you're using ADP Workforce Now, then we can automatically create essentially what we call role groups, a role being not the SnapEval roles we just talked about a minute ago, but the roles that an individual has in your company as it relates to their job function, such as a receptionist or an accountant or what have you. as well as they can also be created around various departments in your organization. And again, this is all automatically imported and updated by SnapEval from your ADP Workforce Now environment. If you're a run powered by ADP user, your organization is, then we can automatically import and update the department groups from within run. So again, we'll populate all the employees into their respective departments based on how they're assigned and run, and make any changes in SnapEval according to any changes that are made in your run environment. So those are the two ways that groups can be created and populated. A user can be a member of multiple groups. And of course, you would expect this, like we just talked about. If you're an individual, you probably have not only a job function, but you're also a member of a particular department. So here you see our two groups, and the person outlined in green is a member of both groups. Group administrators are assigned by organization administrators. That's the only role that can assign someone as a group administrator, is someone who is an organization administrator. So it means your HR professionals are usually the ones that are assigning people within the company as administrators of particular groups. A user can be a group administrator for multiple groups, which again seems very logical. It's very typical for someone who's in senior leadership to be responsible as a group administrator for all departments. A group can have multiple administrators. And again, this is very common, where you will have multiple people who are responsible in one function or one aspect or another for a particular group. So you may have someone who's department head and someone who's a more senior leader above that particular department head, and they're both group administrators for the same group. A user can be both a group administrator and a member of a group, and that's something to consider as you configure your SnapEval instance. And we'll help you through that process, but just know that that's something that is allowable and can be done if you want to make an individual both a member of a group as well as an administrator for that same group. Now, when it comes to groups, one of the most important reasons that we create groups is that we want to be able to assign group level goals, or, for example, job competencies for a group that is related to a particular job function, or department goals as it relates to a group that is a particular department. And these group level goals can be created and updated by group administrators and by organization administrators. As it relates to the group administrators, it would only be for the groups that they are assigned to as group administrators for. So in other words, if someone is a group administrator for the finance department, they can't change goals for someone who is in the sales department unless they're also an administrator for the sales group. When a user joins a group, all the group level goals are automatically assigned to that new user for feedback. So like you see with the blue person here that just was added to the group that's outlined by the red box, this person now automatically has the particular job competencies or department goals or whatever it is available when you give that person feedback. So essentially you can automatically inherit or be assigned, if you will, any of the goals that are associated with the group or groups that you are a member of. When a user leaves a group, they no longer have those goal areas for new feedback. However, all the feedback that they received while they were a member of the group is still retained. So if someone, for example, changes job functions, when they move from Group A to Group B, all the feedback that they received while they were in Group A, they still retain it. But the day they move from Group A to Group B, from this point forward, they will now be getting feedback or snaps against the goal areas associated with the Group B that they are now a member of. Let's look more into this in a kind of an example, because I think it's very important that we really give you a good idea of how this works in practice. So we have a sample organization here. We happen to do a lot of work with certified public accounting firms, and so our example happens to be around certified public accounting firms. And what we've done is, first of all, let's just show you that this is a very typical way that groups get set up in an organization. Now, you don't have to have all these groups. It's not necessary, but some of these, as we've talked about already, if you are an ADP customer, like with using ADP Workforce Now, can be automatically created for you anyway. So you'll see, for example, here that we've got role groups such as manager, senior accountant, and staff accountant. The larger boxes that are basically vertical, such as our departments like the audit department, the tax department, and the human resources department, you can see that they also have members in them, and that there's many members here that are members of multiple groups. For example, George Thompson here is a member of basically 4 different groups. He's a member of the senior accountant role group. He's a member of the audit department group. He's a member of the team leader Bill Wheeler group. And he's a member of his own individual George Thompson group. And that's very important because, like we talked about on the last slide, by virtue of the fact that George is a member of multiple groups, when we're giving George feedback as it relates to snaps, it can be a combination of corporate-wide goals, plus department-specific goals, plus role-specific goals or competencies, plus individual goals and skills that can be in the list of things that we can give feedback to George against. So, again, if someone moves from one group to another, they're going to basically pick up the goals related to the new group that they're a member of. And this is a very, very powerful function within SnapEval, especially for people that are using ADP Workforce Now or ADP Run, where when you make a change in assignment to a department or a role in the ADP payroll tool, that automatically gets picked up and changed within a 24-hour period in SnapEval. So that person will automatically inherit their new goals for any feedback they're going to receive going forward. And you don't have to do anything from an administrative perspective in SnapEval to make that happen. It's just all automatic by virtue of the fact that you're keeping ADP payroll up to date. The other thing that we should talk about just a little bit here, and again, it goes back to our discussion around essentially different roles in SnapEval, is notice that Cheryl Johnson over here, who happens to be our Director of Human Resources, she's got a bunch of different roles. She's the organization administrator, she's a group administrator for all groups, and she's also a manager for Lisa Jenkins. And so that's, again, a very typical situation. And she's a user, of course. So that's a very typical situation for someone who's in a senior leadership role within the human resources department. And Lisa Jenkins is kind of a backup to Cheryl here as an HR generalist. She's also an organization administrator. But they're very likely going to be the only organization administrators in the company. Everybody else is either going to be just a user, or perhaps a user and an administrator, or perhaps also has the group administrator role. Even look at people like Tom Willows here, who happens to be the partner in charge, the senior leader for the whole company. We've made him a group administrator for all departments within the company, but we haven't made him an organization administrator. And the reason for that is that one of the things that happens as an organization administrator, as we've talked about already, is you're going to receive notifications. For example, when there's feedback queued for your review. That's a perfect example of you receiving a notification on your smartphone that there's feedback queued for your review. You're going to get an email reminding you that there's feedback queued for your review. Your senior leaders like Tom Willis probably don't care about those kinds of things. So keeping them as a group administrator for all departments allows them to still be able to go and view all of the users within all of the departments. They can drill down and look specifically at George Thompson or John Smith or Lisa Jenkins and see any details around feedback that he or she has given or received. But they also don't have to deal with all the notifications that come around along with doing things that you're doing as an organization administrator. They also don't have the ability to go and set corporate-wide goals, for example, which you probably don't need them to do. So this is really the key thoughts around how SnapEval is organized. I'll also point out, because again, I think it's really important here, if we look at Kelly Jordan, for example, she has Betty Goodman and John Smith that report to her, and how that's set up is generally through that organizational hierarchy org chart we looked at before. So we would have dragged the Betty Goodman node and the John Smith node over the Kelly Jordan node to make them reports or subordinates to Kelly Jordan. And in addition, we've created a group called the Team Leader Kelly Jordan Group, and we've made Kelly the group administrator for that group, which means that she has visibility to all the feedback that Betty and John Smith receive from anybody else in the organization, whether that feedback is coming from Kelly or whether it's coming from George Thompson, who's Betty's peer, or whether it's coming from Tom Willows, who's the partner in charge. Kelly Jordan has visibility to all that because she is the group administrator for the Team Leader Kelly Jordan Group. But notice that she doesn't have any visibility into, for example, anything related to George Thompson or Chris Schultz, who happen to be a member of the Bill Wheeler team leader group and are part of the audit department. Because Kelly Jordan is not a group administrator for either the audit department or the team leader Bill Wheeler group, she has no visibility to anything that relates to feedback that George Thompson or Chris Schultz have given or received. So that's basically how SnapEval is set up most typically for most organizations. And again, like we've talked about earlier in the presentation, we're going to help you set up all of these relationships. This is the most important thing, because if you have these set up correctly, you can define exactly who has access to do what in your SnapEval system. As I always say, second to payroll information itself, this is probably the most important or sensitive information within an organization, is the feedback that people are receiving for performance. Now, the other thing we should talk about here is this concept of two-tier cascaded goals. And how this works is like this. You're going to set up, or we will set up on your behalf, at your direction, corporate-wide values or goals that relate to everybody in the company. If you have more specific goals that relate to a particular group, such as a department goal, or goals that relate to a particular role in the company, or individual goals, those goals are going to cascade from your corporate-wide goals. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, because your more specific goals as an individual or as a department or as a particular job function in the company, they should all be in support of your corporate-wide values or goals. Secondly, from a dashboard perspective, for you as an administrator, it's very helpful to be able to see all of the feedback that's happening rolled up at your corporate-wide goal level. You can, again, still drill down and see the more specific group-level goal associated with that feedback, but at the highest level, you probably want to see dashboards that relate to productivity rather than dashboards that have lots of detail around every specific job competency or individual goal within the company. So again, when we're giving feedback to George Thompson here as our example, and if he was a member of those 4 groups that we talked about earlier, the audit department, the senior accountant role department, the individual George Thompson group, and of course corporate-wide goals, his goal list that you could give him feedback against would be less than 10 hours for basic audits, exceeds annual billable hour target, records billable hours each week, and completes 3 audits per week. And those are your corporate-wide plus your 4 different ones related to productivity for the groups that George is a member of. So now let's talk about performance summaries. First thing we're going to do is select the employee to receive the performance summary. Now, this could be selected by the employee themselves if they're going to do a self-performance summary. This could be the employee's manager that starts this process. This could be a group administrator or a group that the employee is a member of that starts this process. And lastly, it could be the organization administrator that initiates the process of selecting the employee to receive the performance summary. The next thing you do is select the date range for the performance summary. So if this performance summary relates to calendar year 2019, you're going to want to select January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. And the reason this is so important is because this will drive what snaps are made available to you as the person creating the performance summary to incorporate into the performance summary itself. So those snaps are of course, really only important to us as it relates to this performance summary from within that date range. We don't care about snaps that the employee might have received after December 31st of 2019. As the next step, you're going to have a list of all of the snaps that the employee has received. Now, these are basically inclusive of self-snaps that the employee has done, snaps from the employee's peers, and snaps from the employee's managers. Now, the default setting in SnapEval is that these are only going to be snaps that have been actually shared with the employee. If a snap has never been shared with the employee, it doesn't show up on the list of snaps that could be included into a performance appraisal or performance summary for the employee. It's really our feeling that that's a best practice because, again, hopefully both positive and developmental snaps will have been shared with the employee during the period of that year, as opposed to showing up for the first time for that employee within their performance appraisal, or their performance summary, as we call it. So the best practice is that only snaps that have been shared with the employee can be incorporated into the employee's performance appraisal or performance summary. However, if your organization feels differently about it, there is a corporate-wide setting that you as an organization administrator can change that will allow all snaps, both shared and unshared snaps, to be incorporated into a performance appraisal. So the next step is that you get to select these specific snaps from the list to include into the performance summary itself. The reason we do this is we really want you to pick the snaps that are most important for the employee. If the person has gotten 25 snaps in a particular goal area, you may or may not want to include all 25 of them, particularly if some of them are peer feedback and maybe they're not quite as impactful as some of the other feedback or snaps that the employee may have received in that particular goal area during that particular period of time. So you're really going to focus on the snaps that are most important and most impactful for the employee as the ones to include in their performance summary. Essentially, once you do that, those snaps are now going to automatically be incorporated into the performance appraisal or performance summary, all organized by the goal area that is specific to that particular person. So in other words, if that person has goal areas that are specific to their job function, any snaps that they received that are related to that group that it relates to their job function are all going to be together. Any ones that relate to corporate-wide goals will also all be grouped together. So your whole performance summary is organized around the goal areas that are specific to that individual, and all of the snaps are grouped in those particular categories. Essentially, then, this process is really simple. Again, what's nice is, as a manager or a group administrator going back and doing this performance appraisal, I don't have to go back and try to remember what happened 9 and 12 months ago. I've got all of the snaps that the employee received during the whole year. And essentially, all we're asking you to do is add some comments to that particular section, and then select an overall achievement level for each goal area. So if I'm talking about productivity, for example, and I've got 10 snaps, and we, by the way, automatically give you an average score for all the snaps the employee has received, and we break it out into snaps that came from managers, and snaps that have come from self-snaps, and snaps that have come from peers, and we give you an average score for all those snaps. Now, you don't have to use that score, but they're guidance for you to select the overall achievement level for that employee for that particular goal area during that particular period of time. So again, we're giving you all kinds of guidance on how to do the performance appraisal for the employee and making the process very, very easy. And then you just add some summary comments for the overall performance summary and select an overall achievement level for the performance summary. And that's it. You basically are done. So that's the process for creating a performance summary. So let's look at that whole process of creation and collaboration in a little bit more detail here. So who can collaborate on a performance summary for an employee? Well, it's basically the individual that initiates the performance summary, plus all group administrators for groups that the employee is a member of, plus all organization administrators. That's the universe, if you will, of people that can collaborate on a performance summary for an employee. And we put together a graphic here that shows you how this works. So let's say we're going to do a performance summary for George Thompson, who's highlighted in yellow here. And you can see Bill Wheeler is his manager. John LaFrance is again, just like we looked at a little earlier, is the group administrator for a group that George is a member of. Kelly Jordan and Betty Goodman are in a group that's completely in a different department. And then you've got Cheryl Johnson, who's the organization administrator because she's the director of human resources. And then you've got Tom Willow, who's a group administrator for all groups because he's the partner in charge. So in our little table over here, on the horizontal axis, you see the person that's actually going to initiate or create the performance appraisal. And then you can see all the people that are allowed to collaborate in that process according to the columns that you see here. So let's just say, for example, George Thompson himself starts his own self-performance appraisal. Of course, George can collaborate with himself on his own performance appraisal, so that's why you see the Y here in green. Bill Wheeler is an interesting character because he only has the manager role in SnapEval. And so because he does not have a group administrator role for a group that George is a member of, Bill Wheeler is not allowed in this scenario to participate or collaborate with the performance appraisal that George Thompson initiates. John LaFrance can participate because he's a group administrator for a group that George Thompson is a member of. You can see George is a member of the audit department. John LaFrance is a group administrator for the audit department. So therefore, George can participate in collaborating with George Thompson on the performance appraisal that George Thompson initiated. Tom Willows similarly can do the same thing because he's a group administrator for all departments. So he can also participate in the process. Kelly Jordan cannot participate in the process because although she's a group administrator, she's not a group administrator for a group that George Thompson is a member of. So she can't participate. And as you'd expect, Betty Goodman, being basically a peer for George Thompson, cannot participate in the process because she simply doesn't have a group administrator role, and it generally wouldn't be appropriate for her to participate in that process. So she is not a participant. Cheryl Johnson, who is our Director of Human Resources and is an organization administrator, can always take and participate in that process. And so you see she has a Y. In addition, she is the one role as organization administrator in SnapEval that can submit the performance summary as complete. She's the only person in the company that can do that because she's the only one with the organization administrator role. If you had two people that had the organization administrator role, either one of them could not only collaborate in this process, but they could submit the performance appraisal as complete. Now, if Bill Wheeler took and initiated performance appraisal, George Thompson is not allowed to be a participant. And that's good. You'd expect that because, again, perhaps Bill has put some things into the performance summary that he's not ready to share with George yet. So George can't collaborate with Bill Wheeler on a performance appraisal that Bill initiates. Of course, Bill Wheeler himself can participate because he is himself. And so can Tom Willows and John LaFrance because they're both group administrators, and George Thompson is a member of one of their groups, which is the audit department. Just as before, Kelly Jordan and Betty Goodman cannot, and Cheryl Johnson, of course, because she's an organization administrator, can. So this is how the logic works. Now, if John LaFrance, Tom Willows, or Cheryl Johnson initiate the performance appraisal, essentially George cannot participate. He's not allowed to see that. He's not allowed to collaborate in that process. Bill Wheeler also cannot collaborate in that process because he's not also a group administrator, so he's not allowed to be a participant. But if John LaFrance starts the process, or Tom Willows starts the process, or Cheryl Johnson starts the process, all three of them are allowed to collaborate because John and Tom are both group administrators for a group that George is a member of, and Cheryl Johnson is an organization administrator. So you can see where we have Ys for both John LaFrance and Tom Willows and Cheryl Johnson in these columns. And of course, Kelly Jordan and Betty Goodman cannot participate for the same reasons we've already talked about. And of course, Cheryl Johnson can participate. Kelly Jordan and Betty Goodman, they're not allowed to even initiate a performance appraisal for George Thompson. So it's really not applicable for them. So that's why you see the NAs in the rows here by Kelly Jordan and Betty Goodman. So essentially, this defines who is allowed to participate in the performance summary creation and collaboration process. Now, just to finish out the thought, if we did change Bill Wheeler to be a group administrator and we created a group called Team Leader Bill Wheeler Group here, and George Thompson was a member of that group, then notice that all of the no's that we had for Bill Wheeler previously are now changed to yeses, because basically Bill Wheeler, just like John LaFrance and Tom Willows, is a group administrator for a group that George Thompson is a member of. So that's the way that SnapEval works as it relates to collaboration. Now let's talk about the SnapEval mobile app. And the mobile app is a very powerful addition to SnapEval. We've literally just recently released new updates for both Android and for iPhone for the SnapEval mobile app. So they're running on the latest and greatest tools that Google and Apple have provided for development of these mobile apps. And they take advantage of a lot of the latest features in both Android and the iOS platform. The way the SnapEval mobile app is structured is basically there are a bunch of shortcut buttons that take you to do things that are your common tasks in SnapEval. All of the green buttons that you see here capture feedback, view feedback given, view feedback received, and request feedback relate to either giving feedback to someone else or receiving feedback from someone else. If you are an individual contributor and only have the user role, and 360-degree feedback is not enabled, there is no capture feedback and view feedback given buttons because they don't apply to you as an individual. So you won't have those. But if 360-degree feedback is enabled, then everybody in the company will have all 4 green buttons. The 2 blue buttons relate to capturing self-snaps or feedback about your own performance and viewing the feedback that you essentially have given to yourself. This, again, is very helpful if you're having a meeting with your manager and you want to remember things that you captured about your own performance. You can simply click on the View Self-Feedback button and you'll see all the self-snaps that you've created for yourself. And then lastly, the yellow button relates to the Spotlight performance recognition feedback. This takes you essentially to the list of all the snaps that have been recognized for performance excellence. Now, in the mobile app, you also have all the functionality of the web portal. If you just click on the menu button that you see at the top of the navigation menu on the left-hand side there, the 3 little lines or menu button, it will slide the buttons over to the right and now reveal is the whole navigation that you have available to you based on your role in SnapEval so that you can do anything in the mobile app that you could do if you were logged in through the web portal. As we've talked about with regard to push notifications, that's a very important thing in SnapEval. Now, you're going to receive automatic push notifications as it relates to things like receiving a snap from someone else, or if you're an organization administrator, if a snap is queued for your review, you'll receive a notification around that. And there are a variety of other circumstances in which you will get an automatic push notification to you as it relates to something that is associated with your job function or your function in SnapEval, in the SnapEval system. I do want to point out that we, as a company, do not send you or your employees push notifications. So there's no push notifications that come from SnapEval as a company to you or your employees. This is strictly push notifications that are coming as a result of activities that you're doing inside of SnapEval or the custom ones that you're creating and sending to others within your own company. Badging is another one. If you notice a little red circle with a 1 on it by the SnapEval icon, this basically indicates that there's activity that has happened within your SnapEval account. It functions a little bit differently whether you're on iOS or whether you're on Android. If you're on the iPhone platform, that red circle and the number within that is how many activities there are in what's called Notification Center. It tells you how many activities there are for you to basically do in the SnapEval system. If you're on an Android device, the red circle with a number in it indicates how many push notifications you've received from the SnapEval system. So a little bit different based on how the 2 different platforms operate. But the key is if you see a red indicator or a badge, if you will, on your SnapEval icon on your iPhone or your Android device, there's something for you to do, and it's worth clicking on it to see what that is. Another important feature is voice to text. This is basically the ability to dictate using your voice the content for a snap or for a lot of other things in SnapEval. There's full functionality support for voice to text. So if you want to leave a fairly lengthy snap, and by the way, a snap can be 10,000 characters if you like, you essentially can just dictate that text into the SnapEval system and incorporate it into a snap. It makes it very, very fast to create a snap for anybody else in the company. The other thing that's cool is it supports both portrait and landscape modes. Because again, especially if you're an administrator in SnapEval, you've got various dashboards you have access to. It's really nice to be able to flip the phone from portrait mode into landscape mode and view some of those dashboards a lot more easily. Let's talk about push notifications in general and just a few concepts. So push notifications are very powerful. It's basically the mechanism that all apps on your smartphone use to instantly deliver critical information to the subscribers to that particular application. It overrides everything else on the phone. So you will receive a push notification if you're making a phone call, or if you're in another app, or if your phone is asleep. You're always going to receive those push notifications. It may not present it to you in the moment, but those push notifications will be on the phone for you to see the next time you look for them. As I said, they take precedence over all other smartphone functions, such as email, text, and any apps that you have open, except for the SnapEval application itself. If you have the SnapEval app open, you're not going to receive the push notification. But we send the push notification to you also in the context of an email. So you will see that content. It won't miss you in its entirety. But the way these smartphones work is if you actually have the app open in the foreground, you do not receive a push notification related to that particular application. They're automatically delivered, as I said, whether the device is on or off, if the device is asleep, if the device is in use, if the device was powered off when the push notification was sent. The minute you turn it on, you will see those push notifications. If you're making a call, even if you're using another app on the device, you're going to see that push notification on your smartphone. The nice part is they're completely free of charge to the sender. So it doesn't cost you anything to create a push notification and send it to the recipient. They also use a very, very small amount of data for the recipient. So it's in the order of hundreds of bytes, which is a very, very small amount of data consumed when a push notification is received by the recipient. So it shouldn't eat into their data plan at all if they don't have an unlimited data plan. And of course, if they're on Wi-Fi, it doesn't have anything to do with their data plan because they're just basically on Wi-Fi. So let's talk about custom push notifications. Now, when I say custom push notification, what I mean is you can create a push notification like the one I showed you on the previous page that says, Cheryl, don't forget about our 2 p.m. meeting, or whatever you want that content to be. It can be up to 250 characters in length, and essentially anybody who's an organization administrator can create a push notification for the team, or anybody who is a group administrator can create a push notification. Now, what's interesting is you have a lot of flexibility in who is going to be the recipient of that push notification. You can say it's going to go to a specific individual, such as George Thompson, for example. Or you can decide it's going to go to all individuals within a particular group. Let's say everybody that's within the tax department. Or you can say it's going to go to everybody that has a particular SnapEval role. So again, that could be things like everybody who has the manager role in SnapEval, or everybody who has the group administrator role in SnapEval. You can also send it to everybody in the company. So everybody in the organization is going to get the same push notification. Now, the important part is that everybody who is a targeted recipient for a push notification is going to get a confirming email that has the content for that particular push notification. So even if someone doesn't own a smartphone, doesn't have access to it, they will get an email with that content. If you do have a smartphone and you do have the SnapEval Mobile App installed on it, and you've logged in such that you've registered the SnapEval mobile app on your smartphone with your SnapEval account, then you're going to receive these push notifications. And they will come into your smartphone, as we've talked about already, essentially instantly. So this is a very, very powerful tool because it allows you to really go over the top, if you will, of things like email and text messages and other ways that people receive communications. And especially in this now, all of us being in work for home environments, many of us anyway, this is a very important way to get attention, the attention of your users if you have an urgent or important message that you need to send to them. So now let's talk about the SnapEval integration with ADP. This is specifically for ADP users and doesn't apply to anybody that's signed up for SnapEval through the SnapEval.com website. So essentially, there are 3 things that you get through the integration with ADP. The first, as we've kind of alluded to, is you automatically can import and sync data with the ADP payroll platforms, which makes administration easier, particularly if you have a lot of employees. If you have hundreds of employees, this makes it a much easier process for things like keeping people in the right departments or having them in the right reporting relationships, because we automatically get that data from ADP. The second thing is that you essentially will be signing in with your ADP user ID and password as opposed to your email address and a password that you create for your SnapEval account. So you're going to use your same login that you use if you're logging into the ADP payroll tools. And the third thing is automated billing through ADP. Instead of having a credit card and having that charged each month, you're going to basically see the SnapEval bill, again, presuming it's not the free 10 user account that you're signed up for, you're going to see the SnapEval bill as a line item on your ADP monthly invoice. So let's look at the specifics of what the integration means with the ADP payroll tools. And let's look at Workforce Now first. So over here on the left side is kind of a snapshot, a composite snapshot of the ADP Workforce Now screen that you would see with employee data on it. And what you'll see is we're basically picking up name information, job titles, and your work email address from the ADP Workforce Now platform. We also are picking up the organizational structure. And by the way, you don't have to have all these things synced if you don't want to. You can uncheck the certain checkboxes within SnapEval and will only do the ones that you want to have synced. So if you don't want the organizational structure, the reporting relationships from ADP to be the reporting relationships in SnapEval, you certainly can do that. But most organizations are going to select to automatically import and update the reporting relationships directly from Workforce Now. So if someone changes managers, you update that in Workforce Now, we automatically update that within 24 hours in SnapEval. The other thing is assigning you to your appropriate role group, as we call it, in SnapEval. It's really your job function in Workforce Now. So if you're an HR generalist in Workforce Now, you're going to be in the HR generalist group for your role in SnapEval. And lastly, your department. So if you're in the training department in your Workforce Now account, you're going to be in the training department in SnapEval. And if you change departments or you change roles, again, you just make the update in ADP and we'll automatically update that in SnapEval within 24 hours. So that's the integration with ADP. It's just that simple. The other thing you should know is that we only require the payroll and tax module for all the integrated features that we have. So you don't have to have the human resources module or any of the other modules in Workforce Now. As long as you just have payroll and tax, that's the only thing that's required for all of the functionality that we have integrated with Workforce Now. If you're using Run powered by ADP, it's a little bit different in terms of the features because there's a lot less things that we are able to sync from Run. And there's actually a lot less things actually in the Run payroll tool to select from. So really the things that we pick up are your name and your email address and the department assignment. Now, I'll tell you one trick that a lot of customers do, particularly after they start using SnapEval, is they'll take their departments, and as you can see here, this particular department is Department 09123, and the name of the department is called Management. A lot of organizations want to still have roles in SnapEval, and they want to have those automatic assignments, but there is no role function within the Run platform. So what they'll do is they'll create multiple departments. So rather than just having Department 09123-Management, they might have Department 09123-Management/CEO. And then they might have Department 09124-Management/VP of Finance. And so basically what they're doing is they're creating, although they're still technically separate departments, they're essentially making a hybrid of both department and role information together. And so therefore, again, if they change those assignments in Run and you move from one job function to another within a department, that automatically gets updated within SnapEval. And it gets really important, like we've talked about already, with regard to, in particular, job competencies. One last thing I want to talk about briefly here is the integration with ADP in terms of assigning your users to SnapEval. So if you're familiar with the ADP marketplace, the way that you, again, initially sign up for SnapEval is by creating a SnapEval for ADP Workforce Now or a SnapEval for Run powered by ADP account in the ADP marketplace. The next step is you want to start to think about perhaps assigning some of your team members to the SnapEval application. But you don't want to do it within the ADP marketplace. You do want to take, and you can see this here, we have under the person who signed in at the ADP Marketplace, which is Anthony Albright. You can see under Assign Apps, he's got the SnapEval application. It's SnapEval for ADP Workforce Now. He himself, Anthony Albright, is assigned to the application. So leave your own, but don't assign anybody else here. And the reason is that we've made it even simpler for you to do right from within the SnapEval system itself. And how it works is this. Basically, once you've created your SnapEval account, and once you've logged in for the first time, and SnapEval has had a chance to sync data from either Workforce Now or Run into SnapEval, we automatically create what we call a staging table. And the staging table has all the employees that are assigned to your payroll tool, whether it's Run or Workforce Now, that are active. They will all show up on this page that's, again, just for you as an organization administrator in SnapEval. And we'll talk more about it in a separate video, but what I want to let you know is all you have to do is essentially select the users from this page, and you're going to find it when you log into your account and go into SnapEval. You will find this page under Administration, Manage Users, and then you'll click on the Add Users button, and it will take you to the page that you see here. And from there, you're going to just select the specific users that you want to add to SnapEval, and then you're going to click on the Save Changes button as long as you're on that same page. So pick all the users that you want to add to your account off the first page, and then go to the second page, and so on and so forth. And of course, if it's a free 10-user account, you can assign up to 10 users. Those will be the people that will automatically be then assigned to SnapEval. They'll get an email from the SnapEval system saying, hey, you've been assigned to SnapEval by your organization. And then they can log into SnapEval with their own username and password, and you'll be able to give them feedback or receive feedback from them, depending, again, on how you configure your SnapEval account. But the key that I want to convey here is that you're going to do all of the assignment of users and the unassignment of users, because you're going to do the reverse of this process. You're basically going to uncheck a checkbox for a user and hit Save Changes if someone is no longer in your organization, if they've been terminated and you don't want them assigned to SnapEval anymore. You're basically going to just uncheck the checkbox for that user and hit Save Changes. And then they will no longer be assigned to your SnapEval instance. So that's basically what we want to talk about with regard to assigning ADP users to SnapEval. So we want you to get started now. You should go and get your SnapEval account. If you are an ADP user, you're going to go to the ADP Marketplace and sign up for SnapEval for ADP Workforce Now if you're using Workforce Now, or for SnapEval for Run powered by ADP. If you're using the Run platform, sign up for the free 10-user account and get started. We'll automatically reach out to you and ask you if you'd like us to help you configure your account. It's a free service, as we've talked about, so I really encourage you to do that. If you have any questions, please reach out to us directly. Simply reach out to us at sales@snapeval.com or 585-414-5000. Thanks very much, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.